Stop scrolling, because this story starts with a chainsaw scream that echoed across my land and ended with a $50,000 debt no one saw coming. 8 mature trees fell in one afternoon, not from a storm, not from disease, but from entitlement wearing a clipboard and calling itself the HOA. I owned a quiet, wooded parcel at the edge of a rural community, the kind of place where trees are worth more standing than any cabin built on ego. I visited one Saturday and found sunlight pouring where shade had lived for decades. Fresh stumps, sawdust, tire tracks. Someone had crossed my boundary and cut everything down. At first I thought it was a mistake, until I met her. The HOA's loudest enforcer, a self-appointed rule queen everyone whispered about. She stood there smiling, pointing at the cleared patch, explaining how her future cabin view needed improvement. According to her, the HOA approved it. Permits were basically handled, and I should be grateful for the cleanup. That was the moment my patience snapped. Those trees weren't just wood. They were surveyed, protected, and clearly marked, and none of them were hers. I pulled the property map, the survey pins, and the county ordinances. She waved them off, insisting HOA rules overruled deeds. That lie would cost her dearly. What she didn't know was that my land wasn't governed by her HOA, and tree law is brutally unforgiving. Each tree carried value, age, and replacement cost. 8 trees meant serious money, and illegal removal meant treble damages. Instead of apologizing, she doubled down. She kept building, poured footings, and told neighbors I was bluffing. That arrogance turned a private dispute into a public lesson. I documented everything, hired an arborist, and sent a certified demand letter she laughed at. The clock started ticking. I didn't sleep that night, replaying the sound of falling trunks and the casual way she dismissed ownership. Neighbors messaged quietly, afraid to cross her, but willing to share photos, dates, and witness statements. The more I learned, the clearer it became this wasn't ignorance, it was habit. She had bullied compliance before and never been challenged. I decided then this wouldn't end with a fence repair or handshake. This would end with accountability, paperwork, and consequences measured in dollars and precedent. Because if I let it slide, she would do it again. And I knew the next steps would test patience, money, and resolve, but the law was clear, and trees don't grow back overnight when stolen by arrogance alone. Justice would be slow, public. By the end of this story, you'll see how one afternoon of arrogance turned into a courtroom reckoning, and why cutting corners can cut deep. The next morning, I stopped treating the scene like an emotional loss and started treating it like evidence. Every stump was photographed from multiple angles, measuring diameter, counting rings, and capturing the boundary markers she claimed didn't matter. I hired a certified arborist the same day. When he walked the site, he didn't hesitate. These weren't scrub trees or overgrowth. They were mature hardwoods with decades of growth, each one adding significant value to the land. He explained replacement cost, loss of land value, and the penalties attached to unauthorized removal. His estimate alone made my stomach tighten. This wasn't a small claim anymore. Meanwhile, the HOA Karen kept moving fast. Concrete trucks arrived, framing lumber stacked up. She acted like speed could outrun consequences. I sent a formal cease and desist letter, citing county law and attaching the survey. She ignored it and posted in the HOA group that I was anti-development and confused about property lines. That post backfired. People began messaging me privately, sharing screenshots and stories of fines, threats, and intimidation. A pattern emerged, and it wasn't flattering for her. I filed a police report, not because I expected arrests, but because illegal timber removal is theft. That report created a timestamp she couldn't erase. Then I filed a civil claim and requested an injunction to stop construction. When the notice was served, her tone changed for the first time. She showed up angry, shouting about how I was ruining her dream cabin. I calmly told her dreams don't come with the right to destroy someone else's property. The injunction hearing was quick and brutal. The judge looked at the survey, the arborist report, and the photos. Construction was halted immediately. Her foundation sat exposed like a bad decision poured in concrete. She stormed out, promising to appeal, to countersue, to use HOA power. None of that mattered anymore. The law had stepped in. What really rattled her came next. My attorney sent a demand outlining damages. 8 trees multiplied by replacement cost, plus statutory penalties for willful trespass. The total cost $50,000. Suddenly, her laughter disappeared. She tried to negotiate, offering to plant saplings and apologize. The law doesn't work that way. You don't steal a car and offer a bicycle in return. Neighbors started watching closely. This was the first time anyone had pushed back with facts instead of fear. The HOA board went silent, distancing themselves from her actions. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were canceled. The power structure she relied on began to crack. and she was standing alone in the clearing she created. As the court date approached, pressure mounted. She needed permits she couldn't get, approvals she'd lost, and money she hadn't planned to spend. The chainsaw was quiet now, but the consequences were loud, and everyone could hear them coming. Court doesn't look like television. There are no dramatic speeches, just quiet rooms where facts stack up like bricks. And brick by brick, her story collapsed. During discovery, emails surfaced showing she knew the land wasn't hers. One message to a contractor read, "If he complains, HOA will handle it." That sentence alone shifted the case from civil mistake to willful trespass. Judges notice words like willful. Her deposition was worse. Under oath, she contradicted herself repeatedly. First, she claimed verbal permission. Then she said the trees were dead. Then she argued they were a hazard. Each claim was dismantled with photos, arborist reports, and dated satellite images. When asked why she didn't stop after receiving the first notice, she shrugged and said she didn't think I'd follow through. That honesty stunned the room. My arborist testified next. He explained the ecological value, the age, the canopy loss, and the cost of replacement. He spoke calmly, professionally, and with numbers that carried weight. 8 trees became 8 individual losses, each priced carefully. The judge asked clarifying questions. That's always a good sign. Then came the HOA's attempt to distance itself. Suddenly, she was acting independently. That failed fast. Board meeting minutes showed approval for view clearing. Not my trees by name, but close enough to establish involvement. The HOA's attorney requested a recess. Settlement whispers began in the hallway. They offered $12,000. I declined. Then $20,000, still no. The law allowed treble damages, and I had leverage. More importantly, I had principle. Accepting less would signal that bullying works if you push hard enough. As the trial date approached, her construction loan stalled. Lenders don't like lawsuits attached to property. Contractors demanded payment upfront. Stress does what facts sometimes can't. It breaks denial. 2 days before trial, her attorney called with a new tone. They were ready to settle for the full amount. No admission of wrongdoing, and a confidentiality clause. I refused the confidentiality. Neighbors deserved to know. The judge agreed. Final judgment was entered after a brief hearing. $50,000 awarded for damages plus costs. The room was silent when the gavel fell. She stared straight ahead, expression frozen. Payment didn't come immediately. A lien followed, then a forced refinance. Consequences ripple outward. The cabin was finished eventually, but it sat awkwardly, surrounded by saplings that would take decades to restore. The shade she destroyed in hours. Walking the land afterward felt different. The scars were still there, but so was clarity. Boundaries matter. Laws matter. And silence only protects the loud. This case didn't make me rich. It made something better. A line no one would cross again. After the judgment, something unexpected happened. The HOA went quiet. No newsletters. No fines, no threats. Power structures don't like exposure, and sunlight does more damage than lawsuits ever could. Within weeks, 3 board members resigned. An audit was announced. People who had been afraid to speak suddenly found their voices. Neighbors stopped me on walks, thanking me quietly at first, then openly. One family told me they'd paid thousands in landscaping penalties for trees. The HOA later admitted weren't violations. Another admitted they'd moved their fence after being threatened, even though their survey proved them right. My case became a reference point. "Remember what happened with the trees?" they'd say. Fear shifted sides. She avoided me entirely. When we did cross paths once at the property line, she looked smaller somehow. Not defeated, just exposed. Authority without consent doesn't survive scrutiny. Her cabin stood finished, but the view she'd wanted was gone. The replacement trees, required by settlement, were young and thin, marked with stakes and irrigation lines. They would outlive us both, a quiet reminder of cost. The county followed up too. A fine was issued for unpermitted clearing. It wasn't huge, but it mattered. Official records don't forget. Future applications would carry that history. People often ask if it was worth the stress, the sleepless nights, the legal fees, the tension. I always say yes, because the alternative was teaching someone that my land, my time, and my rights were negotiable. They aren't. Standing up once saved me from standing up 100 times later. I replanted thoughtfully, choosing native species, spacing them for future canopy. It felt like closure, putting roots back where arrogance had cut them away. Nature heals slowly, but it heals honestly. The HOA eventually rewrote its bylaws, clarifying jurisdiction. That alone was a victory bigger than money. Clear rules protect everyone, including those who once abused them. This story isn't about revenge. It's about restraint meeting resolve, about knowing when to document instead of shout, when to wait instead of react. Trees taught me patience long before this happened. In the end, they taught a lesson to someone else too. And if there's one thing I hope sticks with you, it's this. Ownership isn't loud. It's quiet, written, measured, and enforceable. When someone mistakes volume for authority, the law is the equalizer. The land is still mine. The boundaries are clearer than ever. And the next time a chainsaw starts nearby, it won't be on my side of the line. Time passed, and with it came perspective. The stumps softened, grass crept in, and the saplings stretched upward, stubborn and patient. I learned that winning a case isn't the same as winning peace, but it can lead you there if you let it. The money replaced what could be measured. The lesson replaced what couldn't. Months later, I received a letter from a neighbor I'd never met. They wrote that my case gave them courage to challenge an unfair fine. They won. Another said they'd joined the new HOA board to keep things transparent. That ripple mattered more than the check ever did. She sold the cabin the following year. Disclosures included the judgment. Buyers asked questions. History travels. I don't know where she went, and I don't need to. The land stayed. That was always the point. Looking back, the moment that changed everything wasn't the lawsuit. It was the decision to stop doubting myself, to trust the paperwork, the maps, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing where you stand. Bullies rely on hesitation. Remove that, and they have nothing. If you're watching this with a similar problem, remember this. Document early, stay calm, and don't let anyone rush you into surrender. Property law is slow, but it's precise, and precision beats volume every time. I walk that boundary often now, not out of fear, but respect. The trees will grow. Shade will return. And long after names fade, roots will still hold the soil where it belongs. That's how 8 trees turned into a $50,000 lesson. And how one Karen learned that land remembers who truly owns it. That's the end.